I was left while pregnant with twins, standing in a candlelit kitchen, the perfect dinner untouched. He chose to walk away, chose someone else, chose to abandon everything. But me? I chose to rise, to rebuild from nothing, from that first drop of milk in the NICU to the day I stood on stage at the United Nations. I'm Charlotte Avery, single mother, photographer, and founder of an organization that's changed thousands of women's lives. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever rebuilt yourself after being broken. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. The salmon was perfect. I'd practiced the recipe 3 times that week, timing everything down to the second. Richard liked things precise. The wine at exactly the right temperature, the table set with our wedding china, the candles lit but not dripping. I smoothed my dress one more time and checked my reflection in the microwave door. My hand trembled as I touched my stomach, still flat, still keeping it secret. "You're glowing," I whispered to myself, practicing. "We're going to have a baby." The key turned in the lock at 7:43. Richard was always home by 7:45 on Thursdays. I heard him set his briefcase down in the foyer, the familiar click of his cufflinks hitting the marble table. My heart hammered as his footsteps approached the dining room. "Charlotte." He didn't look at the table, at the flowers I'd arranged, at me standing there with my hands clasped in front of me like a schoolgirl. "We need to talk. I have something to tell you first," I said, the words tumbling out. "Richard, I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us. I watched his mouth move as he continued speaking, but the sound seemed to come from underwater. "You're stagnant, Charlotte. Trapped in mediocrity. I need a partner who can match my ambitions, not someone who plays with cameras all day." "I'm pregnant," I whispered. His face didn't change. Not a flicker of surprise, regret, nothing. "That's unfortunate timing." I sank into the chair I'd pulled out for him. The salmon grew cold on its serving platter. Through the dining room archway, I could see his phone lighting up on the marble table. When it rang, he walked over to answer it, leaving me sitting there. "Yes, Judge Morrison," he said, his voice warm in a way it hadn't been with me in months. "The paperwork is ready. I've already moved the assets." My hands found my stomach again. Judge Morrison. I knew that name. She'd been at the firm's Christmas party, a severe woman with sharp eyes who'd monopolized Richard's attention all evening. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He ended the call and returned to the doorway. "You'll need to be out by the end of the month. I've been more than generous. You can keep your car." "The accounts," I managed. "Our savings." "My savings. Check the statements, Charlotte. Everything's been in my name for months." After he left for his study, I sat at that perfectly set table until the candles burned down to nothing. The positive pregnancy test was still in my pocket. Our wedding photo stared at me from the sideboard. 5 years ago, when he'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. I stood up, walked over, and turned it face down. The glass cracked. The boarding house in Tacoma smelled like mothballs and disappointment. Mrs. Chen, the landlord, looked at my swollen belly and raised the deposit by $100. "No noise after 10, she said, handing me a key that stuck in the lock. "No male visitors." I almost laughed. Male visitors. As if I'd ever trust another man. My new home was a basement room with a narrow window at sidewalk level. I watched feet pass by. Sneakers, heels, work boots, each pair going somewhere with purpose while I sat on a mattress that sagged in the middle, sorting through wedding photography equipment I'd once used for joy. The twins made themselves known at night. 2 heartbeats on the ultrasound, 2 sets of kicks that kept me awake. I edited photos on my laptop until my eyes burned, accepting any job that paid. Sweet 16s, corporate headshots, even pet portraits. Anything to scrape together enough for the hospital bills. "You need to file for support," Lena said, sliding a cup of tea across her desk. She ran the small studio where I'd found part-time work. "He can't just abandon you." "His lawyer says I abandoned him." I couldn't meet her eyes. "Left the marital home voluntarily, and since nothing's in my name—" "Bullshit!" She slammed her hand on the desk. "Complete bullshit. The contractions started during an outdoor wedding in Volunteer Park. I was hiding behind my camera, capturing the bride's radiant smile when the first wave hit, then another. The bride's mother found me crouched behind the gift table, trying to breathe through the pain. "How far along?" she asked. 32 weeks, I gasped. "Too early, we're getting you to a hospital." The twins arrived during a November snowstorm. Nora came first, fierce and fighting, all 3 pounds of her. Eliza followed, quieter but no less determined. I held them against my chest in the NICU, their bodies so small they both fit in the crook of one arm. "Hello, my loves," I whispered. "I'm your mama, just me, but I promise that's enough." No one came to visit. I'd sent my mother one text about the divorce, and she'd responded that I'd made my bed by marrying beneath our family's expectations. Now I could lie in it. But on the third day, a package arrived. A card with shaky handwriting and a check for $500. "I was wrong," my grandmother had written. "Start over, sweet girl." I took the first photo of my daughters with my phone, their tiny hands curled into fists. That night, alone in my hospital room while they slept in their incubators, I made them a promise. "You are loved," I whispered into the darkness. "You are wanted. You are enough." The ticking of the NICU monitors became my lullaby. Nora needed oxygen for 2 weeks. Eliza struggled to maintain her body temperature. I pumped breast milk every 3 hours, labeled the bottles with shaking hands, and learned the names of every nurse on every shift. "You're here early again," Pamela, the night nurse, said as I shuffled in at 4 a.m. "Couldn't sleep." I settled into the rocking chair between their incubators. Figured I might as well be useful. She squeezed my shoulder. "You're doing great, Mama." Was I? Richard's lawyer had sent papers to the hospital. He wanted to terminate any potential parental obligations before the birth certificates were finalized. I signed them with Nora's monitor beeping in the background. Each stroke of the pen, another nail in the coffin of what I'd thought my life would be. Lena appeared on day 10 with a casserole dish and a fierce expression. "You're not doing this alone anymore. I can't pay you back, and did I ask you to?" She unpacked containers of food into the family lounge refrigerator. "I've been where you are, Charlotte. 23 years ago, different asshole, same story. Someone helped me then. Now I'm helping you." She moved me into her mother-in-law suite the day the twins were discharged. It was small, but clean, with windows that actually got sunlight. I set up their cribs side by side, hung a mobile of stars and moons that caught the afternoon light. Those first months blurred together. Feedings every 2 hours. Diaper changes that required military precision. Eliza had colic and screamed from 6 to 10 every evening. Nora refused bottles and would only nurse. I existed on coffee and determination, photographing them obsessively. Their first smiles, their tiny fists wrapped around my finger, the way they reached for each other in sleep. "Why do you take so many pictures?" Lena asked one evening, finding me uploading the day's photos while the twins napped. "Because someday they'll ask about their father," I said, "and I want them to see how full our life was without him." The name came from a library book, Eleanor and Elizabeth Bennet, sisters who faced the world with wit and courage. My girls would be Nora and Eliza, and they would know their worth from the very beginning. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and a wedding photography gig that Lena had found through a friend. "Just try it," she urged. "One wedding. If you hate it, we'll find something else." I stood in a church, watching another couple promise forever, my camera steady despite the ache in my chest. But when I delivered the photos, the bride cried. "You captured how it felt," she said, "not just how it looked." Word spread. Summer brought 2 more weddings, then 5. By fall, I had business cards that read Charlotte Avery Photography and a website Lena had built. We converted her garage into a makeshift studio. I learned to work with the twins in a playpen nearby, editing during naps, meeting clients while bouncing a fussy baby. "Mama," Nora said one December morning, clear as a bell. Eliza echoed her sister within hours. Their first word was the only title I'd ever need. "You sure about this name?" Lena asked, holding up the business license application. "Lightfall Portraits," I confirmed, "because light falls on everyone equally. It doesn't care where you come from or what you've lost. The Everett Community Center smelled like tamales and floor polish. I'd offered free family portraits for the Immigrant Services Program, thinking maybe a dozen families would show up. The line stretched around the building. "Next time we charge," Lena muttered, but she was smiling as she helped adjust a grandmother's best shawl. Maria Gonzalez was first. 3 generations of women with the same proud chin. Through my translator, the grandmother told me she'd never had a professional photo. "For my funeral," she said matter-of-factly. "So they remember me beautiful." I thought of my own grandmother's check, now framed above my desk. Legacy came in many forms. Carlos brought his daughter Sophia the 3rd week. "She's never seen her mama," he explained quietly while Sophia played with my lens cap. "Died when she was a baby, but I tell her stories." "Bring me a photo of her mother," I said. "I have an idea." The composite portrait, Sophia sitting in a garden with her mother's image watching over her like a guardian angel, wasn't technically perfect. But Carlos cried when he saw it. So did I. "You have a gift," he said, pressing an envelope into my hands. "Please, let me pay something." Inside was $100 and a business card for his restaurant. "If you ever need anything," he'd written. "Food, a friend, whatever." The nonprofit director approached me after 3 months. "We have funding for a photographer," she said. "Part-time, but with benefits. Interested?" Benefits. Health insurance for the twins. Steady income. I said yes before she finished explaining. My little basement studio grew. Quinceañeras, graduations, citizenship ceremonies. I learned enough Spanish and Tagalog to direct poses, picked up Korean from Mrs. Chen's nephews. The walls filled with thank you notes in a dozen languages. "You're glowing," Lena observed one evening. We were reviewing the month's bookings, completely full, with a waiting list. "I'm exhausted," I corrected, but I was smiling. "The twins are cutting molars." "No, she's right." Carlos had arrived with takeout, as he did every Tuesday. Somewhere between the community portraits and late-night talks about single parenthood, we'd become friends. "You look settled." Settled? I tested the word, found it fit. Not happy, exactly. That seemed too large a claim. But settled, yes. Rooted. The magazine assignment came through Lena's connections. Local faces, the changing Northwest. They wanted someone who understood immigrant communities, who could capture authentic moments. The editor looked through my portfolio and hired me on the spot. "This one," she said, pointing to a portrait of a Filipino nurse still in scrubs, holding her newborn. "This is what we need. Real people, real stories." I thought of Richard's words. Trapped in mediocrity, playing with cameras. The check from the magazine was more than he'd ever believed my work was worth. I deposited it in the account I'd opened in just my name, for just my family. That night, I found an old letter I'd written to him but never sent. The paper was tear-stained, the words barely legible. "How does someone who promised to love you look at you like you're nothing?" I fed it to the shredder, watching the pieces flutter like snow. The twins were calling for water. Carlos had left flowers on the kitchen table. "Just because," the note said. My camera bag sat ready for tomorrow's sunrise shoot. This was my life now. Not the one I'd planned, but the one I'd built from ashes. Maybe that made it more precious, knowing I'd earned every moment of light. Charlotte Avery, founder of Lightfall Portraits and the Portraits of Courage Foundation. The announcer's voice echoed through the convention center. 6 years had passed since I'd sat at that candlelit table, begging my husband to love me. The audience, 300 women who'd rebuilt their lives after abandonment, abuse, divorce, rose to their feet. I stood at the podium, looking out at faces that mirrored my own journey, and couldn't speak for a moment. "I used to think my story was about loss," I finally said, "but it's not. It's about what grows in the spaces left behind." Backstage, I pulled out the manila folder I'd carried for years. More unsent letters to Richard, written during the twins' nap time, during hospital stays, during nights when the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole. "Do you know what it's like to explain to 2 4-year-olds why they don't have a daddy? Eliza asked if you died. I almost said yes. It would have been kinder than the truth. Nora has your eyes. Sometimes I catch her thinking, that little furrow in her brow, and I see you. Then she smiles and she's entirely herself, entirely mine. I ran into your college roommate at Whole Foods. He didn't recognize me at first. Said I looked different. Stronger, he said. I wanted to tell him that strength is just scar tissue that learned to bear weight. The invitation arrived 2 days later. Expensive cardstock with gold embossing. Richard West and Patricia Thornton Klein request your presence at their wedding. A handwritten note at the bottom in Richard's precise script. The girls should know their father's new life. He doesn't even know their names, I told Lena, laughing because it was better than screaming. You're not going. It wasn't a question. Oh, I'm going. I set the invitation on the counter, decision crystallizing. But not for him. Lena studied my face. What do you need? A dress that says successful, hair that says unfazed, and shoes that say, I could buy and sell you. Done. She was already pulling out her phone. Carlos? He'll watch the girls that night. The plan formed as I spoke. I need them to see me choose this, to see me walk in there with my head high. The twins were in the studio, building a fort from backdrop stands. At 6, they were a force of nature. Nora bold and questioning, Eliza thoughtful and artistic. They knew their father's name but had never asked to meet him. I'd always been enough. Girls, I called, come here a minute. They scrambled over, paint-stained and giggling. I pulled them close, breathing in their strawberry shampoo scent. Remember how we talked about choices? I asked. How everyone gets to choose who they let into their life? 2 heads nodded solemnly. Someone from a long time ago invited Mama to a party. I'm going to go, just for a little while, to show them how strong we are. But I need you to know something first. What, Mama? Eliza's hand found mine. You two are not missing anything. You have never been missing anything. Our family is complete exactly as it is. We know, Nora said, with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted her worth. We have you and Aunt Lena and Carlos and Sophia and everyone at the studio. That's lots of family. My throat closed. 6 years of single motherhood, and somehow I'd raised daughters who understood abundance where others saw lack. That night, after they were asleep, I stood before my closet. The woman in the mirror wasn't the abandoned wife from the basement room. She was someone new, formed by late nights and early mornings, by small hands in hers and big dreams taking shape. You're sure about this? Carlos asked. He'd brought wine, sensing I needed a friend more than solitude. I need to see him, I admitted. Not because I miss him, because I need to prove to myself that he has no power over me anymore. Carlos raised his glass. To closure, then. To moving forward, I corrected. Closure implies something ended, but my life, it just began. Tomorrow, I would walk into that hotel ballroom transformed. Not for Richard, not for revenge, but for the woman I'd become. The woman my daughter saw every morning, whole, capable, and complete. Stop fussing, Lena commanded, slapping my hands away from the necklace. You look perfect. Perfect was a midnight blue dress that made my eyes look fierce, heels that added 3 inches to my height, and a confidence that came from 6 years of building something from nothing. The Portraits of Courage Gala was next week. I'd be presenting awards to women who'd survived what I'd survived. Richard's wedding felt like a dress rehearsal. Mama, you look like a princess, Eliza breathed, peeking around the door. A warrior princess, Nora corrected, always precise. Carlos appeared with coffee and raised eyebrows. You sure you don't want backup? I'll be fine. I knelt carefully, pulling my girls close. What do we always say? We are brave, we are loved, we are enough, they chanted in unison. That's right. And Mama needs to go show someone else that truth. The Four Seasons lobby hadn't changed. Same marble floors where I'd once waited for Richard after firm events, feeling small in my department store dress among the partners' wives. Now my heels clicked with purpose. The event coordinator recognized me from the photography industry. Ms. Avery, I didn't know you knew the happy couple. Old connections, I said smoothly. Is the press here? Of course. The Thornton Klein family insisted, society pages and all that. Perfect. I entered during cocktail hour, timing calculated. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and jewel-toned gowns, Richard's world of senior partners and political connections. I accepted champagne from a passing server and began to circulate. Charlotte? A familiar voice, Richard's former secretary who'd always been kind. Is that really you? Hello, Margaret. I smiled warmly. How have you been? You look, she struggled for words. Different. Good different. I heard about your foundation. Others began to notice. Whispers rippled through the crowd like stones in water. Charlotte, Richard's ex, the one he left. Did you see the Times article about her nonprofit? I was examining the ice sculpture when he found me. Charlotte? I turned slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time in 6 years. He looked older, grayer, smaller, somehow. Richard, I didn't think you'd come. You invited me. I sipped my champagne, studying him over the rim. Congratulations on your wedding. Thank you. He shifted, uncomfortable. Good. I heard you've done well for yourself. I've done more than well. A photographer moved past, and I recognized her from industry events. Sarah, I called out. Beautiful work on the Nguyen wedding last month. She beamed, hurrying over. Charlotte, I was hoping to run into you. The Foundation's workshop changed my life. I have 3 referrals for you, women who need portraits for custody hearings. Email me Monday, I said, aware of Richard stiffening beside me. We'll fit them in. Sarah moved on, but the damage was done. More people approached. Clients, colleagues, women who'd heard of the Foundation. Richard stood frozen as I became the center of a growing circle, discussing business, art, the upcoming gala. Charlotte Avery? A reporter from the Society pages appeared. Could I ask you about Portraits of Courage? Our readers would love to know more about your work with displaced women. Of course, I said graciously. Richard had gone pale. It started as a personal journey and grew into something larger. We provide free photography services for women rebuilding their lives, custody documentation, professional headshots for job searches, family portraits to mark new beginnings. And you're entirely self-funded? We started that way. Now we have corporate sponsors, grants, private donors. Success has a way of building on itself. The reporter glanced between Richard and me, sensing a story. And you two know each other? We were married once, I said simply. It ended. But endings, I've learned, are often the best beginnings. Patricia appeared then, resplendent in white. Her face a mask of confusion that shifted to alarm as she registered the scene. Her new husband, surrounded by people hanging on his ex-wife's every word. Richard? Her voice was sharp. We need you for photos. He looked at me one last time. I saw it then. Not regret, exactly, but recognition. Of what he'd thrown away. Of what had grown in his absence. Enjoy your wedding, I said, meaning it. I hope you find what you're looking for. I left before the ceremony. My purpose accomplished. Not revenge, something better. Proof that the life he'd declared mediocre had become extraordinary. That the woman he'd called trapped had learned to soar. My phone buzzed before I reached the parking garage. Carlos. How did it go? Come by tonight, I texted back. Bring wine, the good stuff. The house was quiet when I arrived home. Lena had taken the girls to a movie, giving me space to process. I kicked off my heels, hung up the dress that had served as armor, and stood in my bedroom. My bedroom, in my house, bought with my money. The doorbell rang 2 hours later. Not Carlos, a courier with an expensive envelope. Inside, Patricia's handwriting, sharp and angry. I know what you did tonight. I almost laughed. What had I done? Existed? Succeeded? Refused to disappear? Carlos arrived with wine and takeout. You're smiling, he observed. That's either very good or very bad. She left him, I said, showing him my phone. Margaret had texted. The wedding was off. Patricia had confronted Richard at the altar about his obsession with his ex-wife. Apparently, seeing me thriving was enough to make her question everything. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. I poured wine, considering. Richard only values what others want. When I was just the discarded ex-wife, I had no value. But successful Charlotte with the nonprofit and the magazine features, that threatens his narrative. His loss, Carlos said simply. We ate in comfortable silence. Somewhere over the past years, he'd become my best friend. The person who understood single parenthood, who made me laugh, who never pushed for more than I could give. Can I ask you something? I said eventually. Why did you keep coming around? Those first years when I was such a mess. You were never a mess. He set down his chopsticks, serious now. You were surviving, and you photographed Sophia with her mother's spirit. How could I not want someone with that kind of heart in our lives? The next morning brought chaos. My phone rang nonstop. Reporters who'd been at the wedding, society bloggers, even a producer from a morning show. Local entrepreneur's appearance derails society wedding. The story was everywhere. "Mama, you're famous," Nora announced, finding a photo of me online. "Mama was always famous," Eliza corrected. "Now other people know it too." I turned off my phone and took them to the studio. We had portraits scheduled. A grandmother with her 5 grandchildren, all in matching sweaters she'd knitted herself. This was what mattered. Not Richard's drama, not society gossip, but capturing love in all its forms. Judge Morrison resigned by Wednesday. An investigation into Richard's financial dealings during our divorce revealed a pattern of hidden assets, improper influence, forged documents. He'd done it to others, women who'd trusted him, who'd been left with nothing while he prospered. "You could sue," Lena pointed out. "Get what was yours." "I have what's mine," I said, watching the twins help arrange props for a shoot. "I built it myself. That means more than anything he could have given me." The foundation's gala was Saturday. I stood before an audience of 500, sharing my story publicly for the first time. Not the salacious details the gossip blogs wanted, but the truth of rebuilding. "Someone once told me I was trapped in mediocrity," I said, finding strength in the faces looking back at me. He was wrong about the mediocrity, but he was right about one thing. I was trapped in believing I needed someone else to validate my worth. The photos we take here aren't just pictures. They're proof. Proof that we existed, that we mattered, that we were whole people deserving of love and respect. Even when, especially when, someone tried to convince us otherwise. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. But what mattered more was after. Woman after woman approaching with their own stories. Lawyers helped for free. Shelters made referrals. The network grew, held, strengthened. Richard went to prison eventually. Not for what he did to me. Statutes of limitations are cruel that way. But for what he did after. The other women, the tax fraud, the bribes. I didn't attend the trial. I had portraits to take, daughters to raise, a life to live. Patricia Thornton Klein sent one more letter 6 months later. An apology of sorts, wrapped in excuses. I photographed it for the twins' memory box. Evidence that their mother had been right all along, then fed it to the shredder with the rest. "Why do you keep those?" Carlos asked once, seeing the box of photos documenting our journey. "So they know," I said simply. "So when they're older, if anyone ever tries to make them feel less than whole, they can look back and see how we built our life. Piece by piece, frame by frame, with no one's permission but our own." The letter to my daughters sat on my desk for 3 days before I found the courage to finish it. Outside, Seattle's morning fog wrapped around our Ballard Craftsman, the home I'd bought last year, with a garden for Eliza's art projects and a garage Carlos had helped convert into Nora's science lab. "My darling girls, today you asked me if I've forgiven your father. You're 10 now, old enough for truth but young enough to believe in happy endings. Here's what I want you to know. Forgiveness isn't always the goal. Sometimes freedom is enough." The speaking invitation from the United Nations Commission on Women's Rights had arrived the same day as news of Richard's minimum security facility assignment. The universe, I'd learned, had a sense of timing. 3 days in New York, I told the girls over breakfast. "You'll miss school, but it's educational," Nora interrupted, already lobbying. "We can visit the Met and the Natural History Museum, and we can see where Mama's changing the world," Eliza added quietly. I reached across the table, taking their hands. These hands that had once been so tiny in the NICU, now strong and capable and reaching toward their own dreams. "We're all changing the world," I corrected. "Every time you stand up for someone at school, every time you create something beautiful, every time you remember your worth, you're changing the world." Carlos drove us to the airport. Somewhere between friendship and something more, we'd found a rhythm that worked. He kissed my cheek at departures. Nothing assumed, everything possible. "Knock 'em dead, Avery," he said. "That's the plan." The conference hall was intimidating. Delegates from 50 countries, simultaneous translations, the weight of global attention. But I'd spoken in community centers with broken air conditioning and perfect acoustics of hope. This was just a bigger room. Charlotte Avery's story reminds us that justice isn't always found in courtrooms, the moderator began. Sometimes it's found in the choice to rebuild, to refuse defeat, to create abundance from absence. I spoke for 20 minutes about practical solutions: mobile photography units for documentation, partnerships with legal aid, the psychology of visual evidence in custody battles. But I ended with something personal. My ex-husband once told me I was trapped in mediocrity. Last week, he began serving a 5-year sentence for fraud. I'm standing at the United Nations. My daughters are in the audience, confident and whole. You tell me, which one of us was trapped? The applause echoed off the walls, but I was watching my girls. Nora gave me a thumbs up. Eliza blew a kiss. Everything else was just noise. That night in our hotel room, they curled on either side of me, Manhattan lights painting shadows on the ceiling. Were you sad when he went to jail? Eliza asked. No, I said honestly. I wasn't happy either. I just felt finished, like closing a book you didn't enjoy but needed to read. Good, Nora said firmly. He made bad choices. Choices have consequences. From the mouths of babes. The final entry in my letter came on the plane home. You are not broken birds, my loves. You are not half of anything. You are complete constellations, entire galaxies, full stories with beginnings and middles and glorious unwritten ends. I chose to love myself when someone else couldn't. I chose to build when someone else tore down. I chose to see beauty where someone else saw mediocrity. These choices made us who we are. Someday, someone might try to convince you that you're not enough, that you need them to be whole. When that happens, and it might, remember this. You are daughters of a woman who refused to disappear. You carry the strength of every woman who ever built a life from ashes. You are loved, you are worthy, you are enough. All my love, Mama. Lena met us at the airport with banners and embarrassing enthusiasm. The studio was booked solid through next year. The foundation had received its largest grant yet. Life, my beautiful, hard-won life, was waiting. Welcome home, Carlos said simply, appearing with coffee and bear hugs for the girls. Home. A word that meant something different now. Not a place someone else owned, not a life someone else defined, but something I'd built with my own hands, my own heart, my own stubborn refusal to be erased. That night, I found Richard's last letter in my shredder pile, the one where he'd asked for character references for his sentencing. Instead of shredding it, I photographed it. Evidence of how far we'd come. Proof that the woman he'd tried to diminish had grown beyond his ability to see. I was never trapped, I said to the empty room, to the ghost of who I used to be. I was just waiting to bloom, and bloom I did.